Welcome to Soil and Soul, a Catholic Passage podcast. Before beginning today's episode, we give God the first fruits of time and attention by listening to His Word and reflecting upon it with one of our spiritual fathers. May you be blessed with the Lord in your minds, on your lips, and in your hearts to bear the fruit that
This
eternally
is Father Randy
endures.
Stone, pastor of Holy Cross Parish in Sioux City. Today I'll be reading and reflecting upon both the responsorial psalm, Psalm 1, and the Gospel according to Luke. First, let's take a look at the responsorial psalm. Blessed are they who hope in the Lord. Blessed are they who follow not the counsel of the wicked, nor walk in the way of sinners, nor sit in the company of the insolent, but delights in the law of the Lord, and meditates on the Lord's law day and night. They are like a tree planted near running water, that yields its fruit in due season, and whose leaves never fade. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked, not so. They are like chaff which the wind drives away. For the Lord watches over the way of the just, but the way of the wicked vanishes. Psalm 1 contrasts the wicked with the faithful. Those who are faithful reflect on the law of the Lord. Those who are faithful are like a tree planted near running water. As long as there's running water, even when there's a drought, the roots have access to water. They have access to life. They will not die. So it is with us. We need to maintain contact with God. God is the running water in our life. As long as we are in contact with God, we have life. Our leaves will never fade, and whatever we do will prosper. But for those who are wicked, not so. The Lord watches over the way of the just, but not of the wicked. Whenever we fail to stay in touch with God, our life does not prosper. We have a similar thought in the Gospel according to Luke, when Jesus says to his disciples, I have come to set the earth on fire, and how I wish it were already blazing. There is a baptism with which I must be baptized, and how great is my anguish until it is accomplished. Do you think they have come to establish peace on the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, a household of 5 will be divided 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. A father will be divided against son and son against father. A mother against daughter and daughter against mother. Mother-in-law against daughter-in-law and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. The Gospel of the Lord. That passage is a little bit different. Jesus talks about how there will be division because of him. Just as in that responsorial psalm, he heard that some were wicked and some were just. Some placed their faith in God, some focused on themselves. Jesus says, probably regarding his time, that some people of his time would accept him. But even within families, other members of the families would not. There would be division. And we know that was true for quite a while after Jesus was here, that parts of families might believe and parts would not. The belief in Jesus was divisive within families. And that was the case for quite a long time. Today we can take a look at that reading and reflect on it in our lives, comparing ourselves to those around us who don't believe at least what we believe, or those who don't act as if they believe what we believe. There's division in how we live out our faith. There's division in what we believe, but there's a division in how we carry out what those beliefs are. If we want to prosper, if we want to stay in contact with God, we need to lead our lives based on the precepts that Jesus gives us and the words that he taught us throughout the gospel, in his parables and in all of his teachings, and those teachings that continue to be brought to us today through his living church. And hopefully, we can be united and not divided in that we can believe and live out the faith the same way within our own families, within our parish families, and within our communities. Our families, our parishes, and our communities can be examples of living faith Living faith that maintains contact with the running water of God when we act out our faith, when we live out the principles that Jesus has given us throughout his words in Scripture and throughout the living words that continue us today through our church. Let us not be a cause of division, but a cause of harmony in the way that we all live out our faith.
Take a moment to recall that one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God. Pause to reflect upon God's word to you today. Did you notice anything captivate your attention or stir in your heart? While reflecting, share your thoughts with God. When you are ready, resume this podcast. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of Soil and Soul. God bless you and thank you for joining us.
Welcome to Soil and Soul, a new Christian podcast for those who want to invest in yields that count most. 5 days a week during planting and harvest seasons, Soil and Soul looks to help you sow seeds and reap a golden harvest.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Soil and Soul. Aaron Lords here, today's host. I've got a special guest today, Kyle Smith. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Aaron. How about yourself?
Doing all right. And it sounds like we're both driving. I'm in the combine taking care of some corn here, and it sounds like you're on your way back from a soil sampling job, right?
That's correct. I was working up in Sioux and Lyon counties and just coming back for the weekend and get to see the wife and the beagle at home.
That's great. Well, okay, and for anybody that's listening that doesn't know, we probably should actually introduce this. What is the concept of soil sampling?
Yeah, so there's different kinds of soil sampling. We kind of have a unique setup where we are partnered right now with a company that they specialize in. They have a biological product that farmers spray on, but more importantly, with carbon offsets now, and we can dive into details on that. But basically, farmers can sell their carbon credits to larger companies, and there is a completely carbon market out there, if you will. And we go out and we sample the baseline and each year kind of come back with that farmer and sample those same points and come up with their carbon score and how many carbon credits that they have available. And then these big companies come in and buy that to be more sustainable and more green. And then on the backside of it, the farmer also is incentivized with more sustainable practices. So with that being, if they do cover crops, go to no-till, don't use anhydrous, things like that, practices to encourage more kind of a natural, cleaner way of farming that kind of helps all of us in that regard.
Sure. Yeah. And so again, just speaking as someone that I'm familiar with this, but not everybody listening might, and it might be pretty interesting, something completely new to them. But can you delve a little bit more into this carbon credit thing? Like, let's just clarify this. The farmer has the desire or need to obtain these carbon credits to offset what they're doing, or is it more because we are producing them in our soils, in our fields by doing certain practices, and then these get used by other people? Like we are selling them to these companies who then ultimately sell them to big companies that are blowing out smog. Is that the general idea?
That is the general idea. So basically that there is a cap on the carbon market. Full disclaimer here, we just sample for the company, but this is what the company tells us, and they're all the same, and there's many carbon companies out there. It's kind of a time of, I shouldn't say the Wild West, but this is kind of something on the cutting edge of agriculture right now. And like you said, basically, farmers are producing these carbon credits, and there can only be X amount of carbon credits out there in the world. So it's regulated by different commissions and boards. And basically, say, I always use an example of an airline. When you go to book a flight online, it might say, the CO2 plus rating is this. So you can only make jet fuel so sustainable, correct? So what happens is those companies will then come in and buy carbon credits from the farmer to kind of offset their emissions. I hate to go this way already, but if you look up in the news, Taylor Swift just bought double her output, if you will, in carbon credits to kind of offset her flying around to all our concerts and all of that. So,
Interesting. I hadn't heard. I hadn't heard
yeah.
that. Wow.
So I was always kind of, when I got into this, and we'll dive a little deeper when that time comes. But when I was looking into this job, if you will, I was kind of hesitant, like, how sustainable is this? Well, hey, I can tell you, if Taylor Swift's on board, we've got the Swifties in our back pocket. This is good for the long haul, right?
Yeah, it ain't going anywhere if we've got the Swifties on board, right? And so how long have you been doing this then? It's for the listener, how new is this to you? I mean, if we have any Catholic Passage listeners or viewers, they might even recognize your name. You've actually been in some like a video series that we were doing earlier. It's been over a year ago, I think, at this point, and you were on there as a funeral director. So wait a second, are you the same guy? Like, how does this happen?
I am indeed the same guy. Long story short on it, I grew up in Algona. My grandpa's farm was just north of town, and even though living in town, we always helped with the farm. Well, when the time came for me to kind of choose a career path in life, my dad, who was a deputy, we're a small farming operation, so we supplement it. And my dad said, I know you like agriculture, but I'd strongly consider go get something that you can use and be sustainable. And I did some soul searching then, and I kind of liked working with people and enjoyed kind of the face-to-face aspect of that. I'm very an outgoing person, and we're close family friends with the funeral directors in my hometown. And I thought, well, that's something. And I job shadowed and really, I know this is kind of maybe the wrong term, but enjoyed the work and enjoyed being there for people in need. And the point was kind of driven home when I've had my grandfather passed away. And so went through all that, and I did that for 11 years. And to be honest with you, for about the last, 2 years, I kept honestly praying to God to say, hey, I know I'm doing your work. I feel that maybe my talents could be utilized elsewhere. And it was just coming to a point where I was kind of burned out, and just kind of took its toll. And a friend of a friend approached me about this. Went through kind of a drastic change, kind of threw some things to the Holy Spirit, and ended up getting in contact with a friend of a friend, and they took this contract on with my agriculture background. And it was just kind of a way to look at this as a sabbatical for the first year. And I had an opportunity to get back into funeral service, and I really felt that God wasn't calling me to that. God was telling me, keep coming back here, and that there's something greater yet. And it very well might be in this line of work, and it might be in something else, but I've really come to enjoy everything about this, and enjoy being out and working with the farmers and just being out in God's creation. It's a refreshing, change of pace, and it's just great. I've talked with Father Feller a little bit through this process, and the growth of not only myself, but as our marriage, my wife and I, it's been really great with everything we've been through. And it's just, we were talking a little earlier that my morning is usually, I have a tablet that I navigate to the field points with, and I usually start my morning with daily mass, and then I usually listen to a podcast of Father Mike Schmitz. And just I've grown in my faith a lot in this last year, and this is year 2, and I can't imagine doing anything else at this juncture.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's really good to hear. I mean, it's heartwarming when you hear someone, reflecting on and able to say after, say, a year that this is truly where I feel at peace, and that God has called me to do. And that's not to say years from now or whenever that might be, God might call you to something else, right? Or it might be 2 years from now, who knows? But the idea that you feel really at peace right now, and it wasn't just an impulsive thing, you felt like it was a true discernment, and that's just really wonderful. Like, what your schedule is great right now. Like, if you don't mind me asking, what do you mean by it's really helped with your marriage too? Like, what was the funeral business actually kind of hard on that, or is it more of just the scheduling it helps with that?
I'll be honest with you. Yeah, funeral service is definitely hard on a marriage. And we in mortuary school, when you learned 50% of funeral directors end up in divorce, and I think that's a little higher now. And
Wow.
I know there was times that my wife, I wouldn't say she was just disgusted, but I'd have an awful day, have an awful situation, and who's the funeral director vent to? Unfortunately, it's the spouse, because you can't vent to your clients, if you have a traumatic death or anything like that. And so there was that aspect of it, and there was the aspect of you were never truly present to your spouse. And what I mean by that is you had an on-call schedule, and sure, you'd go to work eight to 5, 8 to 4, or sometimes later if you had a visitation or service in the evening, and you'd get done with that service, you'd get home, everybody else has ate supper, you sit down, warm it up, and then phone rings, and God's calling you to go help another family that He's called their loved one home, and the sleep aspect of it, and holidays, nights, and weekends, and we don't have that now. That part, the stress is gone. Right now, the hardest part about this job is I'm on the road between middle of October and about Memorial Day, but then I have a schedule of a teacher basically, but through that time, I can set my own hours. So I kind of try to be gone 4 nights a week and then home for 3 days. And we've never had that. We've never had that time. And when I was truly home, I'm truly there, truly present. One of the things my wife said that she's enjoyed the most about me switching this and kind of following this path was we could finally go to church together on the weekend and not have to sit in the outside and worry about my phone going off and stepping out and returning a call, and just truly being present as a couple in church on the weekend was just kind of one of her highlights that she told me.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that I guess I'm naive to it. I would have never thought that even going to mass, like on Sunday morning, you'd be getting business calls, because that's what it is, really, business related calls as a funeral director. I had no idea.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's going into it. I had a funeral director tell me one time, it wasn't a job, it's a lifestyle. And, having cell phones and everything is great. Exactly. Having cell phones in this world is great, and technology has been a huge help. But at the same time, that also comes at a price, right? And that price is not having your independence when you need it most at times.
Oh, well, interesting. So earlier you said that you felt this was definitely a God thing, or Holy Spirit. It was definitely a discernment. You didn't take anything lightly or impulsively. Did you have any interesting story on that, or you said it was a friend of a friend of a friend, but besides just naturally with prayer, how do you kind of feel like the Holy Spirit was guiding you in this? Just the overall peace that you felt with it, or is it anything more than that?
A little bit at first. I would say it was not the peace; it was the unknown. Kind of weird. My wife probably held me in longer than I probably should have stayed. Had it been known, I probably would have been more impulsive and got out of it sooner. She really wanted me to kind of stay with it and give it a chance. At that time, when I was really starting to kind of doubt it, I was approaching 8-9 years of doing it, and you always kind of wondered what was next, what was leading me. But unfortunately, I kind of felt that I was headed towards down a path of destruction, not a public one, but just an internal path of destruction. And when I got out of it, it was a lot of unknowns, and like, okay, cast into the deep. That's one of the things you hear, and be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And so we're like, well, we'll give this a shot. We've always got my degree to fall back on if something happens. And, I think the first day I went out, I was quoted to do about 100 points pulled, and I only got about 56 in, and I just remember that night sitting down on the couch with my wife, like, did we really do the right thing? But, we stuck through it. From a physical standpoint, I was physically healthier. I ate better. I didn't consume as much alcohol, and it just kind of grew in it. And all of a sudden you become passionate about it, and you just enjoyed the time that you had with yourself and honestly the Lord. I'll be honest, as a funeral director, I never started my morning with prayer. And that you're going to think that's a terrible thing to say, just because a lot of times you're called out early and I hate to say it, it got put on the back burner. And
Sure.
Now I start every morning with just, Lord, guide me today, help me glorify your name in whatever way I can. And I've learned that just like farming, nothing goes to plan. I ultimately feel that's the Lord saying, hold on, I'm in control, not you. And that's what I've learned, and that's what I've come to love and just grow in the faith. we talk about farming. My favorite line is, Iowa doesn't grow corn, corn grows Iowa. Well, I kind of feel like this sampling job has really grown my faith and being out in the crops and that. And, with farming, it's all faith based. And it's just glad to be back in a lifestyle that you can kind of see the path you were on versus the path you've corrected, and just see the grace of God flow through that.
That's wonderful when you hear that, because how often do we hear from friends and even family members extended that, like, man, I don't feel great in this, or all they ever have is complaints about their job. And I mean, I've heard it from farmers. You don't hear it as often because typically it's you said earlier, it's a whole lifestyle thing. Typically you almost have to be passionate about farming to be in it, because it's just so many hours involved, and it's a familial thing. A lot of times it's family based. It's a whole lifestyle. You change your lifestyle for it, and there's give and take. There's definitely sacrifice involved, but it can certainly strengthen your marriage. It can strengthen your family unit. It can strengthen your faith, right? Like similar to what your change in profession has done for you and how it's integrated into your lifestyle for the better. As I've talked with other people on this podcast and just over the phone before, as we reflect, buddies of mine were just in the cab talking, yakking, and we're like, man, it's like there's negatives to it too, especially if you let it get away from you, where the farming can become an idol and things can take a back seat, right? And you have to not let your faith especially do that. One of the reasons why Father Feller and I kind of thought up this Soil and Soul podcast project was because he had said that at the time, the parish he was at, a number of people in it that were really on fire happened to be in the farming world, whether they were the farmers themselves or the wives or whoever, and they weren't just going to Mass. They were doing all the other things. They were starting these groups and Bible studies and wanting to do retreats and things, but it took a back burner when it came to spring planting and harvest. And so he wanted to reach them and keep that thing kindling. And so I like how you were talking about the podcasts and then listening to Ascension stuff, or even just starting your day with daily Mass. Just you are making time for faith and allowing it to integrate with your profession and with your lifestyle. It's complementary. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Correct. What's the thing? The old saying, everything in moderation except moderation itself, right? And, it's just good to kind of have that nice mix of things. But with that being said, just have the opportunity to grow in that faith and have the opportunity to find these resources out there that can kind of take you to the next step and the next level of your journey. It's something that I would never have dreamt of doing what I was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Switching back to talking about soil sampling itself and the job itself. At the very beginning there, you were mentioning, hey, we could delve into this more if we wanted to on the nutrients and whatnot. I think actually let's do that. Let's talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that Father Feller had said when he suggested reaching out to you and interviewing you is you can take a lot of metaphorical references to soil sampling and agriculture in general, but with just the soil, I mean, that's Soil and Soul in our podcast name, but all the nutrients within the soil and having rich, fertile soil. Even in Scripture, it's referenced, and we are called to be the fertile soil. Now, and I know some of what you're doing, your job is a little bit different than some of the other soil sampling. Like you said, it's not just nutrient-based, but you are also looking at how fertile it is. Or your cores, if you want to mention, do you want to talk about that? Before we started recording, you were mentioning how the size of core you had in your machinery. Do you want to mention how a lot of people are doing smaller cores and what they're going to get from that, and then how your larger core is going to, I'm assuming, have much more sampling availability? You're going to have more to look at, right?
That's correct. When you hear the term soil sampling, most people assume that'll be listening to this. Well, they go out and they put a map over the field and make a grid, and in that grid you might be doing a 2-acre grid or a 5-acre grid, or we've even done 10-acre grid. And what that means is how many points are you taking. So if you had an 80-acre parcel and you were doing a 10-acre grid, you'd be taking 8 samples in that field, and so on and so forth. In that regard, you go out and you take a 6-inch core. So what I mean by a core is we've got a sampler. It's basically just a soil probe. You stick into the ground like you would a spade, but it's just a little 1-inch tube, and you take 6-inch depth, and then you bag that, and you'd send that into the lab, and the lab goes ahead and test it, and then they send you the results, and you can base your fertilizer recommendations on that and put, I need so much fertilizer here, there, or whatever it might be. What we're doing is we're doing 18-inch cores in a random 13.6 acre grid. And what that is, it's based on strata layers. Now, strata layers are your types of soil. So a lot of people would know this, but some might not know that when you go out and when you look across the field, driving across the highways, that you see dirt out there and it's soil, but each soil has a different, subset, if you will, a different kind of loam. And so we're testing each one of them loams to the depth of 18 inches. And in those loams, they're looking at, not only the micronutrients and the macronutrients that you might find in the top few inches of soil, we're looking clear down at a depth of 18 inches to kind of see the whole profile all the way through. Corn roots and everything, they just don't stay on the top surface. They do dive down deep, especially when dry years, they look for moisture. Having more fertilizer deeper can actually be better for the plant. I was up in Lyon County here this morning. Soil's very hard up there. Unfortunately, they're in a D1 situation of drought. And, we're hammering a lot of these probes all the way down to the 18 inches instead of with nice mellow soil where we can go down and just press and kick it down all the way down to our depth. So it creates a challenge. At times you think, okay, this kind of goes back to the faith. Okay, Lord, I'm going to have a good day here. Well, you get out there and all of a sudden your forearms look like Popeye the Sailor Man because you've been using hammer all the time. And you think, okay, Lord, why are you testing me? Why are you putting me through this? But a little, building your faith and strength through physical means there, I guess.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and it's interesting when we're talking about just the nutrients, like that hard packed soil that they're having there in that area, and a lot of it's because of all the livestock there, and they're doing silage, chopping, a lot of extra loads that are being packed over and over. We have a few fields right by home that look exactly the same way. I mean, you go out there and it's really hard. And then the next spring, even, it doesn't even matter with tillage, you're still going to see that on the yield map, or even have to use extra down pressure when you're planting. I'm sure that that's going to affect water permeability and just nutrient uptake and things like that. Now, does that, when you're looking at fields that have those differences, whether it's in the hard drought or what the profiles look like compared to when it's really nice and mellow, is that affecting your test results too with what you're looking at and the value of the carbon credits and just the profile, or not really at all? Is it that's completely two different animals?
It's pretty much two different animals. We can go out and a lot of soil sampling is concluded by the time the ground freezes up. We have the equipment that we can run year round. So we're even pulling cores, when it's, last year I pulled some cores down by Newell that were, when I did it, it was 10 below that day. And I don't think anybody else in the company was working, but I decided to go do it because I'm kind of a wild man that way. So even we're pulling those cores at, 10 below, we don't have to warm them up or anything. We can send them right to the lab, and that's not going to affect anything there. So we're pretty fortunate with the style that we're doing that we don't have to worry about any of the soil composition really kind of affecting our results.
Okay. Well, good. Now, what is the kind of a customer that you're looking for, I guess? Are you dealing with the farmer directly, or is it more of the company? And we don't have to mention any names unless you want to, but I know Monsanto's done a number of them. There's Tuterra. There's all these different companies out there that are doing it. Like you said, it's kind of a whole Wild West right now. It's a new enough thing that all these companies are trying to jump on and do their own version of it. Are you dealing with them directly, or more like a farmer directly?
We're dealing more with the company directly. So we are independent contractors for basically a biological company that does the carbon credits on the side. So the biological side of it, that's relatively new. That's been around a little longer than the carbon side of it. But when I mention biological, that means that when farmers, spray pesticides or herbicides, this is kind of the opposite of that. Farmers go out and they spray, I would call it a cocktail of bacteria, protists, and fungi that they spray on their crop that helps benefit. When you fungicide, a crop, and we needed that fungicide this year with the southern rust, which was terrible for farmers and yields. That fungicide protects and takes care of that southern rust. However, it also kills the fungi in the soil. So, it's no different than penicillin. If you take penicillin, it's going to kill the bad bacteria in your body, but it's also going to kill the good bacteria. So you need to kind of replenish that, and you're kind of looking at dirt. The old term dirt is kind of dead. So if you look at it, call it dirt. Soil is a living, breathing kind of organism, if you think about it, with everything that goes into it. So we, in a sense, work with the farmer, because if, let's say I'm working in a field next to you that's got organics, and that's the company that we work for, and the farmer thinks that's good, we can kind of point him in organics direction, have them get signed up for it. But for the most part, no, we just go out and we do our work, visit with the farmers a little bit, double check to see how their field conditions are so we don't tear anything up, and we go from there.
Sure. I really like what you said there, where you were comparing the difference between dirt and soil. And I honestly, I've been my whole life on the farm and the farming background. I've never really thought about it that way with the difference. I think I've always just used dirt and soil interchangeably, but maybe I should have taken more soil science classes at Iowa State. I don't know. I like that differentiation that you said, whether it's scientific or not, the official term, but I like that difference, because you could almost even relate it metaphorically to our faith too. Like we want to be that fertile soil, right? We don't want to be just dirt. Like dirt, maybe you almost use it in a negative connotation. Sometimes people are like, yeah, that's dirty. That's in a negative light. But soil doesn't have that same connotation. Soil is rich. Soil is full of humus and organic material, and a lot of good things can come from that, like the fruits from the seeds that you plant. And that can be the same for in our families and in our homes, in our communities, in our parishes.
100% agree with that. And, in your defense, I never thought of it either. I looked out there and I seen dirt, and, yep, that's the dirt. Hey, we got to go work some ground tonight. All right. And you love the smell of dirt. That's what you always said. Well, now when you get the soil, completely different way of thinking of it. And it's the same way, like you said, in our faith life. If you look at it, and you can go to church and you can be dirt in church, if you will. I don't mean that in a negative way, but you're just passive. You just go through it. Or as soil, we can actually work to improve our faith outside the 1 hour a week, through listening to podcasts, finding a different spiritual way, just even engaging in fellowship. That's a huge thing. I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus, and just what that organization stands for, and just the group of men that we have with that, it's just refreshing to know that you're not only alone, not only in your faith life, you've got this big support group that are also facing similar challenges that you kind of lean against.
Yeah, we need fellowship. We are called to that. And honestly, you and I are both guys. We're talking here as men. How often is it that guys are naturally vulnerable, or naturally just will say out loud, hey, I need to talk with others to vent, or to run ideas back and forth with similar experiences, the highs, but especially the lows, both. Well, it seems like that comes, I'm not speaking as a woman, but what I've seen is that it's more natural for women to do that, and talking about their feelings is a lot more natural to them. You see guys getting together to go fishing or do sports, watch sports, do activities together, but it's rare that we are talking about our faith and our feelings in that. And sometimes we are. Maybe the culture, maybe we're getting better about that, but it's just so needed, right? You got to have that fellowship, especially of like-minded men that we can relate to, and especially when we're talking about our faith. The spiritual life can't stay silent, because otherwise you are just falling back into, you might just go through the motions. You might go years of just going through the motions, and you're supposed to go to mass, and maybe you're going every week, maybe you aren't, but it's just kind of like dirt. It's just kind of blah.
Yep. Sometimes you just need to regenerate it, like you said.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm glad that you're a knight. And have you found that, you said that in this last year or so, you've really seen your faith grow and expand upon? Is it just because of your allowed schedule, and then the ability to go to mass more and be involved with your wife, and there's also listening to, say, the podcast or Father Mike Schmidt's Ascension stuff, et cetera, et cetera. But it's probably a combination of all those things. It's not any just one thing you can probably pinpoint. I mean, there's probably a lot of other people involved too.
Right. And all of that is part of it. And, there's also another step to it. It's, life events as well. And when you go through life, there's always roadblocks that happen, just situations that you didn't have scripted in life. And with that being said, if we didn't have our faith, I don't know where you'd be in life with those situations. And it's through those situations that trusting in God and trusting that he's walking right with you the entire time, and this is truly what he plans, has your best interest in, and this is his plan for you. It takes a lot of really prayer, and I wouldn't call it being crazy, but in a sense being crazy. I told Father Feller this one time. I said, I think the hardest part of being not only Catholic but a Christian is saying yes to the Lord and just having the faith to just say, yep, lead me. It's kind of crazy. We went through a relocation. My wife and I, we moved back to my hometown here back in August, and people thought I was crazy for doing that. And my wife was well established in a job. She had a job offer for basically a lateral move, but a good lateral move in a sense of where she's working. And it was just one of those things where, okay, Jesus, I trust in you, not my will, but your will be done. And that's what we did. And through a cumulative process, that's where our faith has guided us and made us stronger, not only as a husband and wife, but as a human being as well.
Yeah. My wife and I have had similar experience where we've gone through a number of struggles, and some of those weren't short-term things, and those are always things you got to discern and have trust in. But then there's also been like struggles of years-long things, and not even going into that on this episode necessarily, but just the idea of trust is huge, and it's hard at times, right? But if you can trust in the dark moments and in the hard times, it really makes it so much easier, and ultimately you're going to see that yellow brick road that wasn't super obvious, or that big neon sign of like, go here, because that's not really usually how it works. But the fact that you followed that path will ultimately, you'll see the benefit. You'll see how God has never led you astray. Just have that trust and that faith to move along with these large decisions sometimes, or through the struggles, and then you'll just have a much greater connection and a strength in your faith for when you go through the ups and the downs going forward.
I 100% agree with that. And sometimes, you got to remind yourself, that thy will be done. And I know I stressed that here just a little bit ago, but I think that was one of the things that I kind of struggled with the most. Being a funeral director, it was, okay, you're in charge, you're coordinating with the priest, you're doing this, you're working with the family, you're telling them when to be here, you're doing all this. It's your calendar and you set it. And now that I've stepped away from that, you really see that there's just a lot of unknowns in this world. God will put you where he wants you. And even though it might not be all roses and rainbows at the time, like you said, submitting to his will, and you're letting him guide you in this process. And if Christ is with you and for you, who can be against you?
Exactly. That's really well said, Kyle. And I think this whole episode has kind of just been a great example of a witness in plain sight, as like what Father Feller and I kind of coined a while back, because that's really what a lot of these episodes when I interview people on this podcast is. I mean, they're just everyday people like you and I. I mean, you and I aren't anybody special. We're not a celebrity. We're not Father Mike Schmitz, let's say. We're just everyday people trying to live a good life and to affect, in a ripple effect, the people around us, and get our families, get ourselves to heaven, right? And trying to follow God to the best of our abilities and keep furthering in the faith and hopefully helping others. And that's what we're trying to do with these conversations like this. We're highlighting people like yourselves that have these great witnesses, and showing the listeners that they too are somebody special. They too have a story. All of us do.
And yeah, and to one step further, we're all broken. Thank you to Genesis 3. We're just, we all have a past. And as long as we have the Lord, our future is I shouldn't say inheritance, right? Inheritance is a gift. I like the term more that God wants us. So we just gotta find that path to him, right? As long as you lead yourself back to the Lord, I think life will be, well worth it. And a lot of these problems that we have in our world could be solved if we all just kind of came back to the Lord.
That's really well said. I completely agree, Kyle. And I think that's a good way to put a bow on it too. Ultimately, we're all broken, but yet we're all special, and because of His love, because of His grace, because of His mercy. And once we can acknowledge that, and that we need Him and we need to follow Him, and our lives will be so much better because of that. So,
yep, well said, Aaron. Well said.
Okay, well, great. At that, I really appreciate your time, Kyle, and thanks so much for sharing your story a little bit with us and giving me this opportunity to highlight some of your witness.
Oh, I appreciate it, and thanks for having me. And like you said, I kind of feel like a celebrity right now. I shouldn't. I'm just a normal day, everyday person that just pulls dirt in God's world. So I guess if I can be a witness for anybody else, more power to them.
Oh, well, I'll correct you there, though. You're not pulling dirt, right? You're pulling soil, just like hopefully the soil that you are pulling in the rest of your life as well, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. And to everybody listening, hope you are having a great rest of your day, and take care. God bless.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Soil and Soul, and we hope that it blesses you. Please stay tuned during the week for the other daily shows that we offer as part of this special ministry project we're providing during the peak seasons of planting and harvest. Also, if you'd like to find out more about Catholic Passage, how you might collaborate with us, or even support our mission, please visit us at CatholicPassage.com. Most importantly, you can support us with your prayers. We'll be praying for you. Please pray for us.